In this video, we're going to have a look at some different embroidery techniques to do some lettering. Hi everyone, Sarah here from Sarah Homfray Embroidery. Welcome to my channel, a channel all about hand embroidery. And as usual, before we get going, we have some thank yous to say. So thank you to everybody who has clicked the little super thanks button below this video and donated and supported this channel. And this week, I want to say thank you to Martha, Valerie, Kana and Kelly. Thank you so much, guys. It means a lot to us. So we have done videos before on different kind of stitches for lettering. We've got 2 of those videos. I will put a link to those up here and in the description below the video if you haven't seen both of those. But in this video, I wanted to look specifically at different techniques that you can use, because you could do these letters in your embroideries, you could put them on your clothing, you could put them on bags. So there's lots of scope to use these techniques in your projects. I know lots of you are really interested in how to get these letters and where can you get the letters from. So I'll show you a really simple resource that you can use to get loads and loads of different fonts and different scripts. So do keep watching and I'll show you that later. So I've picked a different font for each technique that I'm going to do, and I just printed them off here. And what I've done is I have traced that onto my fabric. So I'm just going to show you my setup. So I've got some cotton in a frame and I've got a calico backing on it. Do check out our video on backings and why you need a backing fabric, or when you need a backing fabric. And I'm just holding it in a versatile table clamp. I've got 2 because it keeps it extra still for the camera above. You only need 1, but we do have those in the shop, so I'll put a link to those in the description below. And all I've done is traced on my letters so that they are ready to stitch. So the first technique that I want to show you is just basically a stitch. So we're going to stitch through the fabric, and I'm going to show you the simplest stitch that you can do, and then a way to make it look really, really pretty very easily. And I just want to show you this as well. So I've drawn my design on with an aqua trick marker pen. So I traced through the fabric and traced it on with that. This comes off with water, so if I can see any of it afterwards, it's very easy to get rid of. You can use a pencil if you like, or a permanent pen. Just make sure you draw that on really accurately first. So I'm going to use a stranded cotton for this. I'm going to use all 6 strands. We do have a video about the stranded cottons and how many strands you can use and how to handle them and how to store them. So do check that one out. I'm going to use all 6, so basically you can see what I'm doing. And I've got that in quite a large needle for that. I'm using a chenille needle for this. So I've got a nice big eye to take all those strands. I'm putting my knot on the top. That's a waist knot. I'm going to do 2 small stitches. This will hold the thread, secure the thread while we stitch, and then we can just cut the knot off afterwards. So I'm just going to show you that there. So there's my knot, there's my 2 small stitches. I'm going to stitch over that now. So that's a nice, neat, easy way to start and finish your threads. And I'm just going to do a back stitch. This is such a super easy stitch. If you're a beginner to embroidery, and I know a lot of people watching are new to embroidery, this one is really, really easy to do. And you can make it look really pretty very simply as well. So I've just put a straight stitch in, come up ahead of myself, I'm going back on myself, down to meet that previous stitch. So ahead, down at the end, just doing a stitch, and I'm doing it backwards, so it's called back stitch. And I'm just going to go around my letter. Now you'll notice with this letter that I have done 2 outlines. So this is solid. Can be solid if you want to, or you can just pick out the outlines. So it's easy to adapt your font to these different techniques. So I'm just going to do this stitch around the inside line and the outside line, and I'm going to leave the middle blank, and I'm just going to go around the inside and show you this stitch. Then I'll come back and finish it and show you what it looks like when it's finished at the end. So just working all the way around, try and stay on the line. If you can, try and make the stitches the same length. And you can use any stitch you like for here. I'm just showing you basically the easiest one there is, just to show you that it doesn't matter what skill level you are, you can still do this technique very easily. But you could do a chain stitch or a stem stitch. You could do a coral stitch, lots of variations that you can actually use, but this one is super easy and quick to do. So I'm just going to go all the way around, and then I'm going to show you something that we can do with it just to make it look a little bit different. So just my last stitch there to join that up like so, and we've gone all the way around that shape, and I can park that over there ready to go around the outside of the P. We've done our starting stitches, we've stitched over them, that's nice and secure. I'm going to cut that knot off out of the way. See how nice and neat and tidy that is. And I'm going to show you one more thing that you can do with this. So I've got a different colour thread. I've still got a green thread here, and I've got a variegated one. It changes colour throughout the thread. I'm using 6 strands again. I'm going to leave myself a longer end this time. I'm just going to come up at the end, and then I can come back later and I can just cut that knot off and just weave that in under the back later. I'm just going to show you 2 things actually that you can do with this. So now we're going to keep this on the surface, and we're going to whip it around that back stitch. I'm going under with my needle. Got a tapestry needle now which doesn't have a point on it, so we don't catch those fibres when we go underneath. I'm just going to go over back to the right hand side underneath that stitch. We don't go through the fabric. Just going to whip that, whipping the thread around those stitches like so, and you can see it sort of gives you a kind of a sort of cord like effect if you like. And then I'm going to show you a different one for round the P, and you can do this with other stitches as well. I could do it with a running stitch or a chain stitch, just adding another colour, and you could do a contrasting colour, that would look really nice. And I'm going to weave it now, so I'm going to go under, so I'm staying on the same side, coming underneath. Don't pull it too tight. Coming back under from each side now, so you can still see those back stitches, but we've got this beautiful pattern going now, and you can see how pretty this looks and how easy it is to do. It's not difficult at all, and you can do really beautiful lettering very simply with this. Change your colours, you could change the type of thread you use. It looks really nice stitch this. And then the last one there underneath, back down at the corner, and then I can weave that underneath some of the stitches on the back to finish off the thread. So that technique's all about surface stitching, so doing a stitch on the top and doing an outline, so an outline around your letter in a beautiful embroidery stitch. So the next technique I want to talk about is what happens if you've got a thread that won't go through the fabric. So we've looked at stitches and stitching through the fabric, but sometimes you can have a thread that's really beautiful but really hard to stitch with. So I'm going to show you a couple here. Now, we looked at some of these in a video I did called Weird Embroidery Threads, and we had a look at 10 different kinds of threads and how you could use them and what you could do with them, and these are some from that video. So this is a chenille thread, really beautiful, fluffy, really nice and soft, but really quite difficult to actually sew with. It just pulls the pile of the chenille out, so that would be a good one for this technique. We got some velvet thread, which is the same, which did actually stitch quite nicely, but it is quite thick, so you might want to try that one. We looked at some gimp as well, so this is a cord, a sort of a core thread wrapped in a thread around it. This will be a synthetic one, it would have been silk originally. That one is quite difficult to actually stitch with, that would sit on the surface. So I thought for this technique we will look at couching, so that is stitching over a thread with another thread, and the ones that I'm actually going to use are some gold work threads. So if you've done any gold work before, you may be familiar with these. So these are different kinds of threads. This is a Japanese thread, so this is a core thread wrapped in a kind of a gold paper, really. Can't stitch with it, it'll just shred the gold and the gold will come off. So what we do is we put that on the top and we stitch over that, and with that I'm going to put one that's called a twist. So made the same way, it's got 3 pieces twisted together, and each one of those plies has been wrapped with a metallic thread, and this is called a twist. This one happens to be pink, you can get it in gold as well, and I thought I would put the 2 colours together. I thought that might be quite nice. We've got a nice curly letter here to have a go with, so this works really well for sort of script type letters and something that's a bit finer. You can use this technique to fill things in, but I'm going to show you how to couch it down. And I've got just a fine cotton. This is an ordinary sewing cotton. It's a polyester one, a nice strong one is good. And I'm doing it in the pink to match. You could do it in one that matched the gold as well, or you could make a feature of it and do a really nice bright pink or something like that, so you can actually see your stitches. And I'm going to start that one in the same way. So there's my waist knot, my 2 small stitches. to start, and then we're going to start right at this end. So these only go through the fabric at the end of the letter. We're going to lay them on the surface and we're going to stitch over them. And I'm just coming up one side, down the other, and I'm just going to pull those down. Now you want to make sure they don't cross over. In this instance, if you're using a single thread like the GIMP, you can just do it on its own. You don't have to do two threads together. And I'm just going to couch over it, just going to stitch over it with this finer thread, coming up over the top, down the other side, stitches fairly close together, follow the shape of that letter, get some nice curves in it, and just all the way around. So not a difficult stitch to do, this couching. You can just couch all sorts of weird and wonderful things. It doesn't have to be the gold thread, as I've mentioned. You can mix your threads together, two different kinds of threads. So it just opens up a whole world of possibilities of the thread that you can use if you use this technique where we are putting the thread on top of the surface. So I'm going to go around this and then I'll just show you what to do with the ends. Just got to a point where I cross over. So when you're couching, you have to decide what to do. So you can either take those threads on the top through to the back and come up underneath the other side, or you can just go straight across them like I'm going to do. And I'm just putting a stitch in either side of where they go across. And you'll notice I'm not pulling these tightly, just letting them sit there so that thread can move and doesn't straighten out. And then I can just carry on like I did before. So I shall finish this off at the end when I show you them all done, and so you can see what they look like when they're all done. But I just want to show you what to do with these two ends. So let's just bring that to the top. So if you're couching a thread, you will need to take the ends through to the back to finish them off, or they're going to come undone. So you can do that in a couple of ways. If your thread is fine enough, you can put it in a very large needle, thread it in the needle and just take it through to the back, or you can use this technique called plunging. This is what we use in gold work, and we create a little loop. So this is a strong thread, this is like a buttonhole thread. I've just looped it in half, folded it in half, so I've got that loop in the end, so that goes through the eye the same way, and we're going to catch the threads in that little loop. Got it in quite a large chenille needle, and we're going to do each one separately. So I'm going to take the gold one through first. You take all that through till you've got that little loop there. I'm going to put the gold in the loop like so, catch the end of the gold, the end of that thread, wiggle it around and it will pop through to the back. And then I'll do the pink one separately, and I'll just take that pink one just a little bit further. Wiggle it through and pull it, and those two ends are both through to the back. And then all I'm going to do is fold those back on themselves, and I can use the same pink thread, go on the back, just stitch over and over it just to the backing fabric to make sure that doesn't come undone. So another really good method if you can't get your thread through to the back, just by putting it in a needle. So that is a couching stitch, and you can couch lots of exciting things on the top of your fabric. Okay, so we've looked at stitching through the fabric, we've looked at putting our stitches and our threads on top of the fabric, and those two techniques are really good if you want a nice delicate letter, if you just want something outlined, if you want a beautiful script letter. But what happens if you want to fill a letter in? What happens if you want a nice chunky solid letter? So let's have a look at that now, and I'm going to do that on here. Now there's lots of different ways that you can fill in a shape. There's loads of different stitches you can do, so I'm going to show you a few different stitches, and the one that I do want to show you is satin stitch, and because that makes really beautiful lettering, and I'm going to show you a bit of that on here. Now this is quite a wide area to do satin stitch on. If your satin stitches get too long, then they can sort of start moving and they can break. So I'm going to do a smaller area, so I'm just going to use my Applique marker just to draw a smaller shape. I'm just going to freehand it, but you can take a bit more care over this if you like. Fairly confident with my drawing, and we're just going to satin stitch that shape. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you had a slightly smaller letter but you wanted a solid shape, then you could do it over the whole shape. And what I'm going to do is just to get a nice neat edge. I find this helps, and you don't have to do this stage, but I always find it makes it look better. I'm going to just put a split stitch underneath the satin stitch. We're going to work this first and then work our satin stitch over the top of this. And it just makes your edges really neat. It just sits up a little bit higher and it's just easier to do your stitches with it. So I'm just going to do that down both sides using 3 strands of the stranded cotton. I'm going to go over with 6. Doesn't need to be quite so thick, this one, and you can do it in other threads. You don't have to use the stranded. You could use some nice fine wool or some silk, especially for satin stitch. It has a beautiful shine on it. Like so. I'm going to go down the other side as well, and then we'll start the actual satin. So put my split stitch up either side, and I've started my thread with the 6 strands. It doesn't matter which side you start on, so I'm going to be coming up on the outside of that split stitch. Now it's much easier with satin stitch if you do it at an angle to your shape. If we're going straight across, it's quite hard to make it look neat, so just go at an angle like so. 45 degrees is quite nice. Down the other side like that, and then I'm going to come up the same side and go back down the other side. Now I'm going to just angle that needle towards that stitch, right up tight against those split stitches, and needle sort of almost going underneath that previous one, and that will give me a nice neat stitch and a nice sharp angle, and you'll see how quickly you can fill in a shape doing this. It looks really beautiful. So a nice solid shape now. And we do have a video on satin stitch. It can get a bit technical depending on which way you go, so do check that video out. There's also a download on the website which talks about these angles, so if you're interested in this stitch and want to learn more, then do check that out as well. But for now, I'm just going to show you what that looks like. And don't pull it too tight. You can see the angle of that needle going underneath that stitch almost. That will keep that nice and tight and nice and smooth, and you can see how neat the edges are when you've got this stitch underneath. You can just stick right close to it, and how quickly it fills that shape in. So a really nice stitch. Takes a little bit of practice to get it neat, I think. And you could mix your colours up as well. You can do it darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. So there's lots of things you can do with this stitch if you want to. Just go a little bit further with it. And then if you want to, you can just put your needle underneath, and if you just pull them up like so, give them a little stroke, that will help the threads to sit nicely as well. So if you are using this floss, this cotton with lots of strands in it, that will just help to keep them at a nice even tension. And I just want to show you the end of it, because we're fitting it to the letter, so you have to think, what is my letter doing? What shape is my letter doing? I'm going to go right to the top, and we're just going to keep that angle going as much as possible. We've got our shape marked out quite clearly. We've got some single lines here, so we could either do like the stitch we did at the beginning, or we could do a chain stitch or a stem stitch, something different here. And you might want to consider, do you either go straight up the end of this piece of satin stitch, or do you stop it as you get to the satin stitch? So there's no right or wrong, that's just a decision you want to make. I'm going to go right to the end with my satin stitch, right over that blue line. And I think we'll get probably 2 more stitches in there. There's just a little bit showing, so I'm just going to come in from the end and do 1 more stitch. So it's a case of fill the shape in, keep going with the angle, just fill the shape in, forget that it's a letter almost, just think, where's my line, and I need to stop. And there we go, we're right at the end there. And then I would come back to the middle here, and I would do the bottom part. This time I'm going to swap sides. I'm going to come up on this side and down on that side, and that will keep that angle nice and neat throughout. So a really easy way and a really beautiful way of filling in a large area. So let's have a look at a few more stitches that you can use. So you can fill in an area with lots of different stitches. We've just done a big length of satin stitch down that, but you can stick loads of different stitches together. It hasn't just got to be one stitch. So I'm going to show you something decorative that you can do and you could work around. So if you wanted to make a kind of a monogram out of your letter, make your letter a feature just on its own, this would work really nicely. So I've just got the 3 strands in my needle, and I'm just going to do a woven wheel, and I'm going to do it with ribbon, silk ribbon. just going to put it right in the middle, and we're going to have like a feature stitch, if you like, with it, doing 5 spokes, and they all go down into the center. I'm going to weave it, so an odd number is what's needed if you're going to weave something. Just going to park that out of the way there. I've got some silk ribbon, so you can bring other materials into it, you can mix your threads up, you can really make this beautiful. So I've just got a silk ribbon in a chenille needle there, like so. I'll put that out of the way. We do have videos on silk ribbon embroidery if you like this and you want to know more about that, so how to thread the needle up and how to manage your silk ribbons, do check those out. But all I'm going to do now is just weave over and under those spokes. So I've come up in the middle, gone under the first one, going over that second one there, under the third one. I'm just going to go round and round like that, and we're going to make this beautiful rose out of the silk ribbon. So making that feature stitch over that one, under that one. Just make sure you go alternately each time. Pull it quite tight and your rose will sit up. Make a nice 3-dimensional flower. So I've just been all the way around. You can see how beautiful that rose is. So simple to make these, really, really lovely. And I'm just going to take it through to the back. And you could do as many of these as you like. You can make a little group of them if you want. I should just do one for now. And then I'm going to show you what you can put in around it. Now I am going to put some little leaves on this rose, but I'm going to put them on at the end because I'm going to fill this whole area in with some different stitches. Then I'm going to put the leaves over the top. So I will show you that at the end, but I want to show you a couple more stitches that we can do to fill in that shape. So you don't have to have a big solid stitch to fill something in. You can use some little stitches and put them together and fill it in that way. So I'm going to do some French knots. So I've got 6 strands here again, make some quite nice big French knots. If you've got small letters, you can just strand your thread down, or you can use a finer thread and do smaller knots. This is quite good for the camera, you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just coming up, wrapping over my needle. Needle goes back in, pull that tight, let go. We have the ultimate guide to French knots video if French knots are your nemesis. And you really want to learn how to use them. Do check that out. It tells you what to do if they go wrong and how to make sure they don't go wrong. Basically, it's really good. Lots of information in there. So do look at that one if you're interested in French knots. But I'm just going to fill this shape in with them. And I'm going to go right up to the flower because we can put the leaves in over the top afterwards. So you can build up texture upwards as well. You can mix your threads, if your stitches you want to, like I'm doing, or you can just use one. You could just fill it all in French knots. You could change the colour, you can shade with it. So French knots are super versatile stitch. You can do lots of things with it, and one well worth knowing. And I can go right up to that flower because that's quite a strange shape now to fill around with a stitch, but this just means that I can just fill in any little gaps I've got with a knot. So a really great stitch for filling in kind of quite fiddly areas, I guess. If you had a smaller letter with some fine details in it, these are good stitch for that. And I'm going to go right up to this line and go over the line with it. So you can do them in a line as well. Actually, you can do lines with them, so you can do single stitches, you can do lines, you can fill in really super stitch. And you can see when you get practiced at it how easy that is to put them in. They're quite consistent, they're quite nice and even. So I think I would probably change colour now, and I would probably fade it to the bottom, but you can see already how that's filling that shape in nicely and how that letter is building up to look really, really beautiful, full of lots of embroidery stitches. So just before I show you the next technique, let's talk about the lettering, because I want to show you how you can easily get letters of your own to stitch. So a very easy way to get a font to embroider is to use a word processing document. So I'm going to use Microsoft Word here. You can use whatever comes with the device that you are using. There are also apps for word processing as well. And if you don't have any of those, you can get open source programs as well that you don't need to pay for, that you can do your word processing on. So I'm going to use Microsoft Word. I've just made my paper format into landscape because that's easier to see. And I'm going to type in the word that I want to embroider. Then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, so I'm just going to highlight the whole word I can go up to my font size up here and I can type in the font size that I want. So let's make it 130. Now I can clearly see the size of my font, and then I can actually change the font. If I just leave it highlighted, I can go to this box up here, and this gives me a list of all the fonts that are on this program, and you can just work your way down them and find something that you really like. So if you wanted to do something that you just wanted to outline the letters, you wanted something very simple and quite delicate, you could just pick something like this, which has just got simple line, and you can just trace over that and you can embroider that. If you want a script, there's lots of scripts on there, some really nice ones, really nice curly ones. You can pick a script. If you want something that you could cut out, you could find something that's a little bit more chunky, a little bit more fun there, some structure to it, and you could actually cut that shape out. Don't worry that it's all in black, because you can just outline those letters and use the outlines, and you can either fill them in or you can do an outline stitch for them. So there's so many things you can do with this. So let's pick this one. So I could choose with this one either to just outline these letters, or I could fill the whole letter in, or I could do a mix of both. So once you've chosen the font that you like, you can change it to the size that you want. So again, just highlight it and you can just change that to make it a little bit larger. You could make it smaller. So any size that you like. You can mess around with the spacing as well. You can just put spaces in between. You could highlight it and you could make it bold, that will change it. You can make it italic as well. So you can do lots of things with these fonts and these words. So have a little play and find something that you like. And then once that you've got the word that you want in the font and the size that you want, all you need to do is print that off from your printer, and then you've got one that you can trace directly onto your embroidery fabric. Okay, so let's get back to the stitching. So let's go for a completely different technique now, because we've looked at threads and we've gone through the fabric, and on top of the fabric we filled some shapes in. But let's look at some different materials now, and I wanted to show you beads and sequins, because you can make beautiful letters just by using beads and sequins, and any other kind of embellishment that you've got, any version of those if you like. So I'm going to do that on this letter C here, and what I'm going to do is make a sort of a bit of a feature of it. I've just put the line in for the letter, and I'm going to do a little bit of work around here and just really decorate that letter. So we're sort of looking at decorating a letter maybe now. You can mix this with stitches as well if you like. I'm just going to do it all in beads and sequins. So I'm using a nice decorative metallic thread now, and we have a video on metallic threads too, and how to use them and how to not tear your hair out when you use them. So have a look at that one if you love metallic threads but find them difficult to use. And then I'm just going to show you this as well. So I've got a little board here. I've got some beads, different types of beads, different colours. I've got some sequins as well, different shapes, a little sort of cabochon thing there that I'm going to sew down. So just lots of different kinds of beads. I don't know if I'm going to use all of those or not, but I've got them there if I want to. So I shall put them down there. So I'm going to make a little feature piece first, I think. So I'm going to put this jewel down, so this one actually does sew on, so we can come up and down. Now you'll notice I'm not going necessarily in line with the C. I'm just going to come out a little bit. You'll see why that is in a second, because you can have a lot of fun with this. This is really great. I've done my 2 starting stitches, so I'll cut my little waist knot off out of the way, and then I'm just going to pick some stuff to sew down. Some sparkly stuff. You can overlap it here. If you want to work it all out carefully, you can. I just sort of worked it out in colours. I got pinks and greens and sequins and beads. So you can think about this a little bit more carefully if you want. I'm just going to go with the flow a little bit. So I put this sort of fake diamond thing on. Fake diamond. What do you call this? Like a little jewel, put a little jewel on there and a sequin and some beads on as well, so you can just mix these up. And because I've got that nice pretty thread, I don't need to keep changing my thread all the time, and you can just jump out here as long as it's sticking roughly to the shape of that letter. You don't have to stick exactly to it. We can just build this up a little bit. Let's come out here and put something on out here. Got some nice little gold sequins here. I do like a little bit of sparkle in my work. And it doesn't have to be really in your face. You can just use a little bit of this to add an accent to something. Let's put something up here. Let's put another sequin on. I just want to do enough for you to see this letter start to come out. So we're building this up round here. These are quite exciting. These are sort of beautiful beads, like little teardrop beads, and they've just got a hole in the end. So the best way is to thread it on, take it to the bottom of your thread, and then go down the other side. Got some pink beads. Let's put one of those on. And then when you come to the actual shape of the letter, if I just carried on like that, it's going to look like a little bit of a mishmash. So I'm going to take it out into this single line here to make my letter. So I'm going to come up here, and what you can do with beads, which is really lovely, is you can just thread them all on in one go. We're going to stitch over them and mix them up a little bit. Let's put some pink ones on. You're just threading them on the needle, like so. Let's get those ones out of the way. So I just want to show you how you can do this. So I've threaded them on, and I'm just going to kind of curve them around. Now you can go all the way to the end, probably a good idea, but I just want to show you how you can do this. And I'm going to take that down there. And then I'm going to stitch over the top. So I'm going to do that couching again. If you remember, that was the second technique we looked at. So you can couch the beads down. So those beads and the thread are sitting on top of the surface. I'm just going to come up with the same thread. I'm going over the top. That stitch is going to sit between the beads, and that will just fasten them in place and stop them moving around. Beads can be a bit fragile if you don't stitch them down securely enough. So I'm just going between each one of those. And you can see that's making the letter at nice shape. So you can do really beautiful shapes with this. If you want to, you can put the beads down individually. You can do that back stitch that we looked at in the first technique and just put a bead on each back stitch. But I found this really nice method. You can see what colours are going down nice and easily, and super easy to do. Let's just put one more in there. You can't see that stitch that goes between the beads, and you can see how nice and firm they are. And then I can just come on and carry on embellishing that little bit and come down the bottom and do that. So do think about beads and sequins and what beautiful shapes and beautiful patterns you can make with those. So the last technique I want to show you is the applique technique. We've got a video all about applique. You can have a look at that if you're interested in this. And I'm just going to show you it on this letter because we can add some beautiful materials in it. We can decorate the materials. So very easy to do and well worth knowing about. So I cut my little letter out here. So I've cut it out from my design here. So this is a great one again if you want to fill in a letter. If you've got a nice big solid letter and you want to really make a statement with your letters, this is a great one for that. So I've cut my letter out there. There's my E. And in fact, when I traced it on, this looks a little bit rough, and I just traced around the inside of it because I want to just place it. But when I put that on, that will go over and cover it up. So I didn't go around the outline. I just went on the inside, which is why it looks a little bit rough, but it just gives me an idea of where to put it. This is the fabric that I'm going to use. So great for using up little odds and ends of leftover fabrics. If you're a quilt and you've got loads of beautiful quilting fabrics, these are great for that. What you do need to make sure though is we're going to draw around that on there and cut it out so you've got your letter the right way around. So I'm going to draw it on the back, so that's the shape it needs to be on the front. I'm going to turn it over and that's on the back, so just make sure that you're not mirroring it and it all comes out back to front. I'm going to use my trick marker to draw around that as carefully as you can. And now you need to cut that out. Now if you want to, you can put some iron-on interfacing on the back like you would use if you were dressmaking, or some Bonder web if you want to make that a little bit stiffer, or your fabric frays quite easily. But I find if you cut carefully, you should be fine with it. It shouldn't fray too much, at least till you've got it stitched down, and then we can secure the edge. So that is an option if you want to. It's just to put something to stabilize it on the back, but this quilting cotton especially is pretty good. It doesn't fray too badly, so cut that as carefully as you can, and then I'll show you how to stitch it down. So I've cut my letter out very carefully there. Just place it in position. If you want to put a pin in it, you can, to hold it in place, and I'm going to sew it down with a matching sewing cotton so that the stitches are invisible. Now you can have the stitches as a finished edge if you want to. You need to do your stitching super neat, so because the stitches will show, so you can use a contrasting colour if you like. Let's put one more in and cut the knot off so it's out of the way. And then all I'm going to do is come up on the outside of the letter and stitch down into that fabric. So I'm just going to hold that in place. It's very small, it will be okay. I'm just going to take a little stab stitch, so up in the outside of the design, so up in this fabric here, down into the fabric that you're stitching on, and just take little small stitches. So these are called stab stitches. The outside down into that that fabric, just enough to catch the fabric. If you get too close to the edge, you'll just fray it. So you need to go far enough into stitch, but not so far in that we can't cover these up. And we're going to do an embroidery stitch over it to give it a nice edge, nice finish to it. But you can imagine doing a whole letter in this. It look really beautiful. A word in this, sorry. Look really beautiful in these different fabrics. So I'm just stitching it in place all the way around with these little stab stitches. Been all the way round with my stab stitch. My letter's nice and secure on there, but we're going to just do something over the edge. Now, as I said, if this is neat enough, you can leave it like it is. It's a little bit fragile like this, and we're doing something beautiful and decorative, so let's do a stitch over it. So you can do lots of different things over it. You can do that couching that we looked at previously over the edge. You can couch some big nice group of threads over there and make that a really decorative edge. You could put some beads around it, but I'm going to do an actual stitch around it. This is one of my favourite stitches, turning into one of my favourite stitches, and that is a blanket stitch. So I'm just using 3 strands of the stranded, come up on the outside, down on the inside, back up in that loop, pull it tight, and this makes a really beautiful decorative edge around here, and it just helps secure that fabric down even more. So if you want this to last a long time, a stitch like this will be really a good one, just to make sure that's super secure. And I could just change the lengths of that as well. Don't have to do it all the same length, it just looks a little bit pretty if you do some longer and some shorter, and you just see that edging that it's starting to make around it as well. If I do this stitch to the inside, I get this kind of little sort of stem stitch rope effect on the outside, and it just finishes off the letter really nicely. That's my waist knot, so I can cut that off. I've reached it and that thread's secure. I'm just going to go around the whole shape like that. Don't worry about what the shape does. You can keep doing it. If you get to an angle, if you've got a square angle in your letter, you can just stop the stitch and start it again on the next side. So it's easy to go around the shape in this one. I'll just do a little bit more so you can see what it looks like. Super nice stitch, this one. And we've got an extensive stitch library with loads of different embroidery stitches, so if you want to see what's in there and have a go at something different, you can. You don't have to use what I've used. You can find another decorative stitch and have fun with that stitch. So I'm going to go all around that and finish that. I'm going to tidy at the ends and just finish off those other letters as well, because I want to show you what they all look like together. Tidied all the ends, finished them all off on the back, so let's have a little look through this now. So this was the first technique, so we just did some stitching on top, nice simple stitch, easy to just decorate it here with this weaving and with this whipped thread here, and I've done a different colour in this just to show you how you can use two colours to add a little bit of extra dimension to that. So then we moved on to some surface stitching, so some couching, so for threads that won't stitch easily or won't go through to the back, or really decorative threads and really pretty threads, you can just stitch over them on top. So that was this one here, and I just did the two different colours together, but you can do any combination of any threads that you like with this. Super easy to get lots of texture and lots of interesting threads in this technique here. Then we looked at a more solid one here, so if you want to fill in a solid letter and you haven't got that nice beautiful delicate line like we've done for the P and the E, and you want something a little bit more striking now and to show off your embroidery skills. So we filled this one in with lots of different stitches here. So here is that satin stitch we started with, the French knots, which I've actually shaded as I've gone up here, so done darker at the bottom. This beautiful ribbon rose, I've put those little leaves on last, and you can see I've just gone through the stitching underneath, so you can just put the needle right through. Just take care when you're doing that, but you can really layer it up and get lots of beautiful layers on that. A few more French knots up here, and I actually put in an eyelet here because that's another nice stitch for filling in shapes as well. So there's an eyelet there, and I just outlined it with the pink. So I've just mixed lots of different stitches there. You could just do one stitch and fill it with one stitch, that's fine. And then I came down here with the green just to finish off the letter, and I did that the same as the first technique. So that's my back stitch, so that's the whipped one, and that's the woven one to finish off that nice filled in letter A. Then we moved on to one of my favourite things, which is some beads. I love to put beads on here, and we just did all of it in beads, embellished it, but you could mix your beads and your threads and your stitches up here. So I just did a little sort of focal point here with lots of really interesting beads and sequins, and then just couched down over those single beads there and just changed the colour, shaded the colour. So started with the green and came out to the pink and the gold at the edge. So just little subtle changes that you can make just to add some extra dimension. So one of my favourite ones is to put some beads and sequins in. And then lastly, we did the applique technique. So we cut out this beautiful fabric here and we stitched that down nice and securely. And I've just done a buttonhole, a blanket stitch, same stitch, different spacing. So blanket stitch for this one round here in the pink thread, just to finish off that edge nicely and just to make that extra secure. So I've been having a little think about what you could do with these letters. So you could embellish your clothes and your bags with them. They'd make a beautiful keepsake for a new baby. You could put the date of the birth of the baby, or you could put the two names of somebody who's getting married. You can have a little sign for your craft room. So loads of different things you could do with these beautiful lettering techniques. So I hope you enjoyed those techniques, everybody. You've learned something new maybe, or been inspired to have a go at putting some lettering into your embroidery projects. If you would like to see this one in a little bit more detail, we'll put this up for the members and patrons to say thank you very much for your support. I'll put a little video up of that, and we've got a little bit of a behind the scenes of this one as well, which is quite funny, so I'm going to show you all that. So if you're interested to see some more stitches along this theme, then do check out this video up here. This is our peacock video on outline stitches, and then another peacock one down here on how to do some filling in stitches. You might find those really interesting as well. Do give this a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this video, and we will see you next time.